Say. All right, so let's get started here. If I look away from the camera, it's because people are wandering in. I'm going to start with a little bit of intro, and then Will's going to jump in, and then we're going to hopefully get a lot of feedback from you all. So we're not here really to discuss what happened and the new rules. That's not the point here. I think that we're all in the loop about that. I think at the end of the day, what we want to talk about mainly is how we're going to roll this out going forward. So here's what I'm going to share with you all, and it's very important to have the right mental mindset. You should be worried if you are not exquisitely prepared. And many of you have heard me say this within the context of different things. You need to be exquisitely prepared. You have to have exquisite delivery within the context of those buyer meetings. And you have to have exquisite timing within the context of those buyer meetings. So it's exquisite preparation, exquisite timing, exquisite delivery. You have to have it dialed when you meet with buyers. And I have long held the belief that we're in the waiting room. Oh my gosh, there's so many people on this call. I'm really shocked because of all the crazy this morning. So oh my gosh, we got 52 people on this call. Woo! Dolly, do I look good? So at the end of the day, I have long maintained that in our industry, and I'm not speaking specifically to anybody here, but in our industry, we have treated the seller process with a great deal of due diligence and a great deal of thoughtfulness and a great deal of reverence. We do not go into interactions with sellers we have not ill prepared. We have to have that same thing going on when we meet with buyers now. And we've treated that process casually by comparison, and those days are over. So we really need to have this great value proposition with buyers. Now, I was speaking with Tom Smealin right before this call. Poor Tom, I cheated him out of some of his coaching call with all of this stuff going on. But Tom, I know that you've forgiven me already. So at the end of the day, the question that remains unanswered is, okay, how do we roll this out? Now, I was sharing with Tom, and it's not in the outline, that with sellers, value proposition was built around the following. Sellers want the most amount of money within the timeline that suits them with the least amount of agita, as we say in Italian, aggravation. So sellers want the most amount of money in a timeline that suits their timeline with the least amount of angst. And the question that begs answering is, okay, can we build a value proposition around what buyers want? Do we know what they want? Do we know what they want? I don't know if Ed McNally's on the call. Man, they just keep coming, right? I don't know if Ed McNally is on the call or not, but Ed and I were talking last week, and he went out on an appointment with sellers. And this piece applies to both buyers and sellers. And, Ed shared with me one of the questions he asked this seller was, hey, Ed, I wanted to take credit for this if you're on the call, but I thought better of it because I didn't want to sin and then have to, atone for my sinnage for taking credit for something that you brought up. That was very insightful, I might add. But at the end of the day, I really do believe that just like we should be asking buyers and sellers their sense of the real estate market right now. Hey, Armand, could you share with me what your sense of the marketplace is right now? What have you concluded? And now I think it's very, very important to ask that same question that Ed asked on his listing appointment is, hey, Mr. Seller, I'm just curious. There's a lot of what's going on now about how real estate agents are compensated. You have to be careful of the verbiage that you use. Sometimes just a few words make all the difference in the world. Do not ask buyers and sellers, do you know how real estate agents are paid? Do you know about commissions, right? hey, I'm just curious, there's been a lot of press about how real estate agents are compensated. Could you share with me what your sense of that is? And Ed asked that question, and Ed and I were kicking this can, and at the end of the day, there's only going to be a handful of answers. So anyway, there's only going to be a handful of answers when you ask a buyer or a seller about these new rules. And they go like this, okay? Armand, I have no flipping idea, right? I have no flipping idea at all. So that's going to be one answer. The other answer, I know everything about it, Armand, and I want to negotiate the fees with you. The other question is, you tell me, kind of thing. So there's only a handful of answers, but if we're not prepared for that, again, exquisite preparation, we're going to be subjecting ourselves to a premature autopsy. I promise you. You need to ask that question now of buyers and sellers.
Jennifer, seriously, I'm on a Zoom call.
Okay, guys, please mute yourself. As we say in Italian, ma fa una scena bazza. You're going to make everybody crazy, right? Before I hand the microphone to Will. There's been also a lot of, how should I say it, acrimony toward NAR. National Association of Realtors. Many people have shared with me what value do they bring us. That there's been a lot of acrimony toward NAR and what do they supply us with for our dues and so forth and so on. And I was of that. I was thinking about one thing that NAR does do is it does provide us with footing in Washington, D.C. They have a very strong lobby. They're the richest trade organization literally on the planet. And they do provide us some good mojo in Washington, D.C. The most notable is the write-off for interest and taxes on people's tax returns that they pay on their mortgages. And that's been a sacred cow thanks to NAR. And if we were to lose that piece as agents, it would very, very much compromise the way that we roll out. All right, Will, take it over because I need to catch my breath after this morning.
You did great. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for being here. So I want to tell a couple stories that are going to kind of bring it back to the present. And I'm fortunate enough, in some respects, to have been in this business since 1988. And when I got in the business in 1988, not only were the interest rates 11%, but there was some class action lawsuits going on at that time, about a year later, from home buyers against real estate brokerages because they thought they were being represented and they actually weren't. So because back then, what had happened, I don't know how far before, I mean, John's been in the business quite a bit longer than me even, but sub-agency, basically for a long time, all real estate agents represented the seller. And then what happened, sub-agency was born because a lot of listing agents didn't want to have to show their own houses so that they would get somebody else in the office to show it. And then the MLS, the multiple listing service, was built out of that. And for a long time, a couple of decades probably, every real estate agent represented the seller. So buyers were running around, getting in your car, you're talking to them about their hopes and dreams and their kids, and you're talking to them about how much they love the house and how much they want to offer. And then it turns out that you were actually taking that information and giving it to the seller to try and put a deal together because you had a fiduciary obligation to the seller through the listing agent. So up pops these large lawsuits in the late 80s. You can look it up on Google. And basically, the Department of Justice got involved again. And well, not again, they got involved again this time in 2018. But back in the late 80s, the Department of Justice said, hey, wait a second, buyers need to be represented. This is wrong. So what happened in 1989 in Ohio, we came out with the agency disclosure. And I don't know, whoever, we're from a lot of states on this call. But Ohio was 1989. And after that point, in the MLS, there were two co-broke fees. There was an S, which is sub-agent, dash, and then the amount. And then there was a B, dash, and the amount. Well, a lot of the old school brokers, they did not want to pay these new rogue buyer agents. So basically, for about 3 years, we had a bunch of brokerages in our area that didn't want to acknowledge buyer agency. They were stuck in the past. And then we had the progressive brokerages, after the agency disclosure, they wanted to separate it so that their agents who were working with buyers represented the buyer. The problem was at least half the brokerages in our area refused to compensate buyer agents. So as you can imagine, that's the same as what we're going through now, because again, it doesn't matter why you're not getting paid. It's about you're not getting paid. So in 1991, I started using a buyer representation agreement because in order to combat the seller agent not willing to pay a buyer agent if you were actually representing the buyer, because their position was, if you're representing the buyer, get the money from them. Now we're talking 35 years ago. If you're representing the buyer, get the money from them. That was the talk from these old school brokers. So what we would have to do, we got a buyer representation agreement, 1991, so 33 years ago. It was actually before that, it was 1990. We get a buyer representation agreement. There would be a clause in it, just like now, that says that the buyer authorizes their agent, me, to collect a fee from the listing broker. So the steps was, because we didn't have email or the internet back then, I would call up John Gualtieri and I'd say, hey, John, I'm going to show 123 Oak Street tomorrow, but I wanted to call and reject your offering of compensation in the MLS. And you'd be like, what? And I would tell you that's what I'm doing. After a while, John knew that I was going to make that call because his broker wasn't allowing him to cooperate with buyer agents. And then I was representing the buyer, so that I would have to make that call. It was kind of like the Wile E. Coyote cartoon where Wiley walks up with the sheepdog to work every day with their lunch pails, and they check in, then they beat each other up all day, and then they check out and go to the bar. That's how it was for a while. So I'd call John up, reject his offering of compensation, and then I would write it down on the MLS sheet that we had that conversation. Then if my buyer liked the house, I would simply, on the purchase agreement, because they've authorized me to collect a seller paid fee, on the purchase agreement, I would write on behalf of the buyer. I was at Century 21 at the time. On behalf of the buyer, seller shall pay Century 21 Akron Town and Country Realty a buyer representation fee in the amount of 3% of the sale price. And that's how we addressed it. As this was happening, so we had to deal with this for 3 years. As this was happening, I had joined RE/MAX. And at the time, there was two big independents because RE/MAX was growing so quickly that for 6 years, they would not pay RE/MAX agents a full co-broke. They would only pay half. So same thing. So we've got, at the time, so we think about what we're potentially going to go through here in July, because it's not out yet. Nothing's been ratified. I mean, this is just what the suggested settlement is. Until then, it's business as usual. The good news is we've got April, May, June, and part of July to get really good at breaking down our services and eloquently communicating them to the buyer, which we're going to get into. But back then, I had sub-agents not willing to pay me as a buyer agent. And then as a RE/MAX agent, I was only get half a co-broke fee because it was called an adverse commission split. So we had two big independents at the time, Smythe, Kramer, and Realty One. They had about 70% market share in Northeast Ohio. I'm just south of Cleveland. And they basically said, we're only paying you half a co-broke fee. And they did that for 6 years. So we had two sets of brokerages not willing to pay us if you were a RE/MAX agent and then if you were representing a buyer. So, and we got through it. The point is we had a buyer representation agreement that said, and our buyers knew, listen, if we help you buy a house where they're only offering sub-agency, we're going to have to ask for it to be paid. So anyone who's wondering, are buyers going to pay us, or are they going to sign a representation agreement, or are the listing brokers still going to pay us, or are we going to be able to get compensated through the seller? I believe that we're going to be fine. Because we went through this twice 30 plus years ago, and it's the same thing, just a different title. So that I wanted to bring that up because that gives me a lot of perspective that maybe some of the agents that have been in the business less time, I have that, and that's why I haven't been worried, because we went through it once before. The key is going to be to have a buyer representation agreement, and John and I would like to discuss, like, how do you, a lot of agents have fear around a representation agreement. For some reason, they can't line it up in their head that it's just like a listing presentation. You outline, like if you went on a date, a blind date, you wouldn't be talking about marriage on the first date. I mean, there's a lot of steps that have to be accomplished between now and then. If you walk in on a listing appointment, even if it's your sister's house, you're not going to walk in the front door and say, okay, where can we sit down and go over this paperwork? There's, John talks about getting in the red. I mean, you sit down with them, you build rapport, you find out their motivation, you try to find out their pain, and you think about ways to provide a solution. And that's what elevates you in their mind, by building the gap between their pain and where they want to be. And then the paperwork, a listing agreement, ends up just being a housekeeping item. We all know this because we all list houses. The exact same thing happens with a buyer. So where we're going to have to get in the mindset between now and whatever brokerage you're with, doesn't really matter. Between now and July, first of all, you should start using representation agreements right away. Don't wait until July. If you have a team, your job right now is to build confidence with those team agents, and don't make them feel like they're out in the just hanging out there in the cold. This is no different for your team agents or for most of us if we haven't been using representation agreements than if I said, okay, call that for sale by owner, or go up to the bar and talk to that person. Try to get $100 out of them. Whatever. We're doing things that are uncomfortable, but once we start building some confidence around this, just like when we started listing houses at the beginning of our career, we're going to find that this is the quicker you can substantiate your value, break down. If I were you, I would go back over your last 5 or 10 transactions. Think about all of the steps that you went through with your client, the pitfalls that happened, the problems that occurred, write it all down and get that into a presentation describing the process, describing the pitfalls. That's what I've been doing. And I've been using a representation agreement since 91. We never stopped using it. My team agents all use representation agreements. When I had my own brokerage for almost 21 years, no agent in my firm used work with a buyer without a representation agreement. And it's just like you sit down with the buyer, you go through the process, you have an intake form on what they're looking for, their motivation, what kind of house they're looking for, you get all that out of the way because that's what they want to talk about. Then you talk about the search and offer process. Then you talk about the closing process. And then at the end of that, you say, okay, do you have any questions? Is this a level of service that you want? Yes. Okay, great. Do you mind if we take a minute and go through this paperwork? And then you just say, just like when you're hiring any other professional, accountant, attorney, we have some paperwork that just says you're hiring us. And it talks about how we get paid. And then you just spend a few minutes going through the document. You'll find once you've done it a couple of times, it's really a non-issue. And we can get in the weeds about how buyers are going to react and how sellers are going to react. We don't know right now. Us talking about what's going to happen is like weathermen and women talking about which way the hurricane's going to turn and how big the storm surge is going to be. Or it's like us talking about our favorite football team and what they're going to do this season. All it is conversation, and nothing's accomplished. And most of this conversation is negative because we just don't know how it's going to play out. But the one thing I can guarantee you, get good about communicating your value to buyers and sellers, and get good at explaining to sellers the need to continue to offer a marketing fee to your to buyers, because otherwise you're just a FSBO. So John, I mean, hopefully this is helpful, but what do you think, John?
Well, I believe that everything that you just said is obviously accurate. The things that I just want to weigh in on based on what Will just shared is number one, Will's absolutely right that we have to demonstrate our value to buyers. However, I really do believe that not only do we need to share that within the context of their pain, but I also believe that it's going to be helpful for us if we can clearly chunk it down to the most important things to buyers. For example, sellers, as I said earlier, they want the most amount of money in a timeline that suits them with the least amount of aggravation. Well, buyers may want to pay the least amount of money with the best mortgage rate. You all get the idea. And they're also going to have personal pain. The other thing that I reckoned was this. There is going to be a tsunami of scripts and dialogues around this particular issue. You who are my coaching clients know that I believe there's a place for scripts and dialogues, but they fade away to insignificance when compared with the questions that we ask. We find pain first by asking questions and then educate. And I always say this, we have to know what's behind the curtain. Fools run where an angel fears to follow. And we're not going to be able to articulate our value proposition without understanding where that buyer is first. You find out what's behind the curtain, then you can proceed to educate. And it can be very problematic if we don't. And I shared two examples earlier, and I'm just reinforcing this. I believe that right now we should be asking buyers and sellers what their sense of the marketplace is. Going forward, I believe that out of the gate, we're going to be best served by asking buyers and sellers if they understand how agents are compensated. And look, I agree with Will. It's no big deal. I've been using buyer agent compensation agreements, and so has Will, for a long time now. Will, the third thing I want to point out, and then, open it up for discussion with everybody, and you can unmute yourself. And I put some potential topics for discussion. But at the end of the day, Will mentioned that, when you get married, it's a process. And I just wanted to add a footnote there, unless you're in Vegas and you get married by an Elvis impersonator. Okay. That's the only exception. I'm sorry, guys, I crack myself up. So let's just look at the stuff in the chat box first. I know we are discussing the changes, but are they really set, and has EXP settled? We saw the Compass settled on their own last week. I don't think EXP has settled. Will, am I correct about that? I'm thinking settled the suit because they're involved too.
No, they haven't yet. But again, all that stuff's going to work itself out. I'm trying not to burden myself with any of that. I just want to be able to make sure that I can do my job.
Yeah.
They'll figure their stuff out.
Yeah, well, again, I think it's going to roll out. I think that now that the DOJ is involved, nobody's going to take on the full force and effect of the U.S. government. Dolly says that they've had buyer agents agreements in North Carolina for years, so she's with us. Clay, Will, thank you. Would you be willing to share your intake form and how you roll out, how you trained agents to give buyers confidence in signing the buyer agents agreements, saying that they get paid X%? So I guess what Clay is saying, hey, when you sit down with a buyer, how do you bring up the commission issue? I believe that's what Clay is. And then how do you give them confidence that it makes sense for them to pay us? I think that's what he's trying to
Yeah. So keep in mind, I got licensed when I was 19. So I took the ABR course in 1995, the Accredited Buyer Representation course in 1995. So I was 26. And at that point, I was selling about 60 houses a year. And I was a top agent in my office. And I was cocky. That's all been beaten out of me now. I mean, but back then, I felt pretty good about myself. So what I did after that buyer rep course, I decided they talked about retainer fees. So I took it one step further. They talked about retainer fees. I'm like, you can get a $500 retainer fee from your client. So for 1 year, I just to make myself look good in front of all the old agents in my office. And when I say old, like 35 to 40, now I'm 55. So, but anyway, for 1 year, I got a $500 retainer fee from every buyer I worked with because I didn't want to discriminate. So I got it from every buyer I worked with. And after that year, I stopped getting the retainer fee. It's all about, if you create value with the buyer, like John said, you have to find some buyers. You've got engineers, you've got history professors, you've got people that work in factories. There's all different mindsets. There's all different types of personalities. Some people in July are going to have not heard of this. Then there's going to be people that are already asking us questions now. So you have to, one step at a time, you have to talk to your buyer and find out, like John said, what's their, where do they feel the market is right now? And they're going to bring up stuff to you, right? So if you ask them questions about their thoughts, tell me, you're buying a house right now. What's motivating you to buy a home right now? Are you what's going on? What's your take on the housing market and what's going on with everything? They'll share with you if they know about it, right? So you're going to get some people that are going to put their foot down, but there's some people that only buy clothes at garage sales. There's some people that only do all their own home repairs. There's some people that only try to sell their own house or their own car. And those people aren't the kind of people we want to work with anyway, right? I mean, we have to decide who, and this isn't starting today. This is over the course of your career. We run into people that are tough, and our job is to either soften them up or choose not to work with them. I mean, that's it. But I don't think suddenly, last year, 89% of buyers used a buyer representative. So 89% of buyers worked with an agent who represented them. And less than 8% of sellers sold their house themselves. Okay, that's the lowest it has been since they started recording it in, I think, 1984. So my point is, the statistics are showing that home buyers and home sellers still want to work with us. My mind is weird, and I pay attention to trends and patterns, okay? It doesn't make me good at everything. In fact, it makes me bad at a lot of things. But I follow trends and patterns, okay? There are no trends or patterns that are showing, if I owned a Blockbuster in 2006 or whatever, I would notice, and when Netflix came around, I would notice that there's a new way of watching movies. Or if I owned a record store, I would notice that there's a new way of listening to music with MP3 players and then the iPod. There's nothing like that right now. The process of selling a home and buying a home has not changed. The only thing that has changed is these search portals like Zillow and Realtor.com and Homes.com. They have shortened the amount of time it takes to locate a house, okay? But in our business, we have a thing called, in logistics, they have a thing called the last mile problem. And in logistics, the last mile problem is getting an item from the warehouse to your front door. Well, in our business, the last mile problem is from the time a buyer says, I would like to buy this house, until they get their keys. And technology has not been able to close that gap for a couple of reasons. First of all, it's the largest single purchase that most people make, and it's overwhelming. And the vast majority of people get overwhelmed easily. And we're lazy. Human beings are lazy and we get overwhelmed. Those are two things that we combat on a daily basis, most of us. Our laziness and the fact that we get overwhelmed. So we have to get our heads in check. That's why everything you see right now is about mindset. I mean, that's what everyone's talking about, all these influencers, right? It's about getting your head straight so that you don't get overwhelmed and trying to do a little bit of action. Well, that works really well for us. That's why we still have jobs. Buyers, when we look at the largest single purchase, sellers don't want to deal with it and buyers don't want to deal with it because, again, nothing has changed. The mortgage process hasn't changed. The only thing that's changed is the search process from an MLS book to Zillow. And the offer process, we can get something signed electronically. So other than signing documents electronically, nothing else has changed in the process. Barbara, the appraiser, still has to go out in most cases and walk through the house. Insurance agents still have to send somebody over. Home inspectors still have to go to the house. We still have to talk about all of these obstacles in the course of a transaction. Nothing has been streamlined except for maybe the credit report. But that doesn't have anything
Will,
to do
may I
with it.
just interject here? We got a lot of stuff in the chat box, and I'd like to get to everybody.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, let's
Could you
go
wrap
through
it
them.
and let me move on?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. So, guys, Armand made a point, and actually, Armand, I had you at the beginning of this, but my cage was a little rattled with all this stuff. So I want to tell the story this way. Will made the point about, showing your value, and Armand and I were talking last week. And Armand, I hope you don't mind me sharing this, but I said to Armand, a lot of people are concerned about realtors who are going to charge 10 cents because they're not confident. What do you think about that? And Armand said, I'm not a 10-cent, and I think the word began with an F and it ended in ing, realtor. I'm not a effing 10-cent realtor. And so really, I mean, pros think of it that way. Who else is here? Debbie, can buyers sign agreements with more than one agent? And like when you've shown a buyer a house and they end up buying with a listing agent, my guess is probably not, because it's just like we have an exclusive agreement with sellers, we're going to have an exclusive agreement with buyers. I want to bring up something that Joe Ward mentioned. Joe, are you still there? Yeah, I see Joe's in Hawaii. But Joe and I were talking last week as well. And I said, Joe, I'm trying to wrap my head around this whole idea of we're not allowed to show a single house without a buyer agency agreement. And I'm baffled on what to do there. And Joe said, it's pretty straightforward. He was probably thinking it was pretty straightforward, dumbass, but he didn't really say that. And I thank you, Joe. But at the end of the day, he said, look, for the first house, you just offer a buyer an exclusive, right? Just for that house. And I think that that's a pretty brilliant way to go about it. The thing that I wonder, though, and Joe also brought up this, as I was wondering, okay, well, how do they police it? How do they enforce it? And Joe believes that there's going to be maybe something in MLS or Showing Time that monitors that. Dolly, did I deal with yours? Dolly. Dolly, can you mute everyone? Yes, I did. Okay. Ken Abramowitz, the ABR course is free right now. Ken, I saw that too. I'm guessing that it's free for two reasons. Number one is NAR wants to extend us an olive branch here. And I'm wondering if they're going to share in that course, and I'm thinking they are, what all this means. Now, that having been said, I was talking with Tom Smealin this morning, and we were both saying, at the end of the day, part of the thing that's problematic is that there are many exceptions to the rule. Christine, I don't know if you're on the call. I think you are when I was shuffling through. Christine Richardson is an outstanding agent, outstanding success. And she served for many, with many chairs at the local and state level. But part of the thing that's problematic is that a lot of agents who serve, and I served on many legislative committees and standard forms committees at the state level, they don't sell a lot of real estate. And I just find whether or not NAR and the state associations and so forth can do us a lot of good in terms of how to present. I'm pretty ambivalent about that. I'm undecided. Unless they bring in a gun like Armand or Dolly or Will or somebody. But Will doesn't want to do that, he told me, because they're only going to pay him 10 cents an hour. Okay. Jim Clark. Jim's on the West Coast. Jim, you must have gotten here, what, at 10:9:87. Well, it's not so bad, but you must have had to get up at 6. I'll talk to you later on today unless you're taking a nap. The Washington state legislature passed new laws that went into effect in January that require buyer agent rep agreements before showing a home. State form has been approved, and I've attached that form. So thank you, Jim. At the end of the day, that form will probably give everybody a good idea what it looks like. But again, in states like wills, I think wills, dollies for sure. You know, it's standard vanilla. You've got to do that. Will, can you jump in and right after Jim start fielding some of these, because I've got a little bit of a scratchy throat and I feel my voice leaving me. Debbie.
Debbie asked, can a buyer sign more than one agreement, or can they hire more than one agent? Again, it depends on whether or not your buyer agreement is exclusive. This is all going to boil down to communication and setting expectations and boundaries. Just like when you're working with a seller, it's no different. We're just going to make the focus, we're going to take the focus off of the house. The good news is we all have to use these forms now. No one's at a disadvantage or an advantage. Well, you're at an advantage if you're smart and you can communicate well. But other than that, we're all in the same boat. So I guess if you agree to let a buyer sign a non-exclusive representation agreement and you don't, and they go rogue on you, but that, I think that can be controlled.
Okay, and then we have Carl after that, Will. I also have been using buyer agreements since 91.
Yeah, Carl's been licensed longer than I have. He's in my market. I'd love to hear his opinion because he's been using, he and I have talked a lot about this, and he's always used a representation agreement. And like he said in this message, I'd like to get his opinion on here, but 99% of the time they sign one. I mean, I never have anybody walk out. And again, it's been easier because you can tell, you know, because they know you're going to get paid most of the time. I still think we're going to get paid most of the time. I was at a event Thursday and Friday, a team leader event, and there were team leaders there selling 1,000 to 2,000 homes a year with 80 to 100 person teams. And they were all saying, they think that it's going to be like one-offs where a seller is going to absolutely refuse to pay a buyer agent. But if they do that, they're going to be punished because they simply won't be able to get a whole bunch of buyers making offers on their house.
Hey, Will, can I jump in there?
Yeah, Carl.
I think that the key to it is just like on a listing presentation. You want to articulate your value proposition. You have a plan of action. You're going to do this, this, and this, and you do, and this brings value to you. Same thing when you're working with a buyer. You're going to do all these steps. That's my plan of action. That's how we get properties. You get to the closing table. That's how we get you to try to get you the best price for the best terms. You're working in your best interest. Where you're a fiduciary for you. And so I think it's at least presently it's going to be no different than it was back in the 1990s when we had this adverse split with these companies and we were able to get deals through, and it was just a different way of doing business. And I think once everybody gets used to doing it that way, then it'll be commonplace again.
I agree, Carl. Thank you for that. I think, 6 or 8 months from now, it'll be the new. It's like every time we changed an MLS, like there was a period of time where seems like we were switching MLSs all the time. We'd have to learn it all again and we'd get upset. Or dot loop. God, when dot loop came around, we all lost our minds. I mean, we're going to adjust to this really quickly because everybody's in the same boat. We're all in the same boat. And this is the beauty of this is it's capitalism now. Nothing's dictated to you. So you're going to have more control, I think.
And you think of it this way. I mean, you go on a listing appointment, you're not going to list a house without a signed listing agreement. Same thing with the buyer brokerage agreement. I mean, it should be the same concept.
Yeah, because we're not going to be a darn 10-cent agent. Well, I just want to jump in. I sent something out in the chat box. I'd love to hear from a few luxury agents like Bobby J, Darla, perhaps. Clay Oliver's in a luxury market, but you guys who are in luxury markets, do you see any differences in the way that you're going to have to roll this out versus, those of us who are in year-round markets? Bobby, what do you think? You have to unmute yourself.
There we go. Am I unmuted?
Yeah.
Hello? Am I unmuted?
Yeah, you're unmuted.
So Our market, yeah, I don't know that, at first when this bomb dropped, we were pretty shocked about it. But the more that I've kind of digested this, I think it's probably a really good thing that we're able to, we're such a destination that it's going to be difficult for a buyer to drop in here and figure out this market or go around us. And so I think I'm viewing it as a really good opportunity to sit down. I'm already experiencing some problems with sellers, though. I just got a text. That's why I was a little distracted here at the moment. I just got these really beautiful lots on a lake I'm working on with a very difficult agent or seller that wants to list these at 3% already. She's already kind of down the rabbit hole of how she can save some money. So there's going to be some sit down, difficult conversations coming, and like Will and I guess Coach, I've been doing this for a long time. It seems like there's something always changing and shifting. So here we go. I think it's just going to be another hurricane that we'll get through.
What market are you in, Bobby, so everyone can know?
We're down here in Santa Rosa Beach, Walton County, 30A area.
Florida, the Panhandle
Florida,
of Florida.
Yeah. Panhandle of Florida.
Beautiful area, by the way.
Yeah. And, I feel it's going to be interesting, but I think like Will was saying, I think it's just another little bump in the road that we navigate around. My biggest shock has been, the you get caught up in social media, the public's perception of real estate agents. I think we've done a horrible job explaining what we do. Apparently, NAR did that as well. If I was active in trying to defend myself on social media right now, all I would probably do is try to explain to people what we actually do. And for some reason, the public does not understand that whatsoever, is what my experience has been as I've been kind of cruising around looking for what the public opinion on this has been. I've been rather quiet about all of that, and I am pretty active socially, and I haven't put on an opinion yet of this because I wanted to gather more data. I think personally, I've been in the gathering information stage and shutting my mouth till I have it all locked in. Going to meetings like this, listening to NAR, listening to our local board, and trying to develop my own strategy.
Well, I got Luke Bauman here. I sent out that email initially because I am concerned about the downward pressure of commission. Because as he had just said, I've had sellers who already said, hey, can I just wait till July to not, offer commission? And that's the perception out there. And I think there's going to be a lot of agents that run with that and just say, oh, you just have to offer a little commission. The buyer agent will, they're responsible now. And I think on the selling side, I think it's going to get a lot harder because I think there's going to be a lot of agents who are like, yeah, I'll list for 3% and we'll offer 1%. And then on the buying side, I think it's going to be really hard to get a buyer agency signed saying you're going to pay me 3% if the seller doesn't pay. Like, hey, we can try to write it into the offer, but I see a lot of challenges more. And I know everyone, kind of thinks it's going to be business as usual, but I think there's going to be a lot of agents who just don't care and are going to do what they can, and it's going to disrupt the industry. But I wanted your feedback on that.
Will, you want to take that one?
Again, we're talking about how well the Browns are going to do this season or how they screwed up yesterday. I mean, none of us knows how this is going to play out. All we can do right now, the wonderful thing is between now and July, like John and I were talking yesterday, headlines never last more than a week. They don't. And headlines don't come up again unless it's an ongoing thing like a pandemic or a war. They usually, and by the way, the housing market isn't something that most people are thinking about all the time unless they're in or out of the housing market. So the good news is all the headlines, you think back to October when this whole settlement happened, and we heard about it in the news for a week, and then it was silent until last Friday, 2 Fridays ago. So I think that these headlines are going to be gone. And by July, we're not going to be dealing with the headlines and all of the social media stuff. It's just going to quietly happen. And I think you'd be surprised, again, during a time in 21, maybe I'm insane. Maybe I'm just too positive. All right. But that's what lets me sleep at night. In
Well, let me-
2021 and 2022 and part of 2020, real estate agents were posting on social media. It seemed like every post was, I just listed a house at 123 Oak Street. We had 58 showings. I sold it for $100,000 over list. Congratulations to my seller. Now, the motive behind that post was, I'm going to show them how good I was. But the perception by the public was, holy crap, I don't need a real estate agent. Like if they're getting 56 showings and 20 offers and they sold it for 50,000 over list, I don't need a real estate agent. And I was very worried at the time that was going to impact our business and make it harder to list homes. Statistically, the number for sale by owners nationally went down. So despite we were encouraging sellers to sell their homes by themselves with those posts, that we were showing them how easy it was. And the number for sale by owners went down. During that same period of time, we had buyers that were losing out on 7, 10, 15 homes. They may fire us for another agent, but did any of you see a pattern or a trend that during that time where you were fielding all of these calls from real estate agents and you've got 19 offers you're trying to manage, were you also getting dozens of phone calls from buyers panicking, saying, can I just buy the house directly from you? If your answer was yes, please tell us in the chat. But I wasn't getting very many of those calls, 1 or 2 or 3, but it wasn't a pattern. So during a time where it was really hard to get a house, buyers weren't jumping from buyer agents to calling the listing agent directly. And during that same period of time, sellers weren't, the data on for sale by owners didn't change. So I'm not going to be of the ilk where just because sure, you're going to get some agents that are going to go rogue, but they're going to get bitten on the back end because they're going to get all these phone calls now. They can't hide behind the MLS. They're going to get all these phone calls saying, hey, Will, how much are you offering on 123 Oak Street? Screw you, nothing. Or some version of that. By saying nothing, I'm saying screw you. So I don't even have to say that. But if I say we're not offering anything, sorry, I had to list this house for 3% just to get it. Okay. So I agree with Luke. We're going to get a few of those, but I now have to explain myself to Bobby when he calls me, or he texts me and I say, we're not paying anything, or we're paying 1%. I don't think that's going to be, I think that there's going to be some bonehead agents in that transition period, but there's going to be lots of weird crap for a couple of months.
Yeah.
Then I think things will start balancing themselves out.
Yeah,
Personally, maybe I'm wrong, but that's what I think.
I agree with Will.
I'll jump in and say, about Dolly says something about this being market driven. I'm going to point out that here in North Carolina, in our market, first of all, we've had buyer agency for literally decades. So we're used to getting buyers to sign those buyer agency agreement. We're just going to need to get them done a little bit more in advance of showing houses all the time. But what I want to point out is during 2021, 22, when the market was crazy, builders did this thing where they literally stopped offering buyer agent commissions. They went ahead, and this has happened before in North Carolina. When the market's a crazy seller's market, builders kind of lead the way, and they stopped offering buyer agents commission. It went from 2.5 to 2 to 1 to like $2,000, and then it was none. Absolutely, for about a year. And it was kind of crazy. And those of us that were working with buyers said, look what these builders are doing. If you want to go to a new home construction neighborhood, you're going to have to sign my buyer agency agreement and agree to pay me 2.5% or 3% or whatever was that particular buyer agent was willing to negotiate with their buyers. We've done this before, going to do it again. And I'm going to point out that once the market turned around and those builders realized, oh my gosh, offering 0% isn't doing us any good. They started offering 2.5%, and then, oh my gosh, it went to 3%. Builders were offering 3%. The standard.
We had 4% in our market.
Even 5%. I saw 5%. Builders offering 5%. So this is going to be very much market driven, and we're just going to have to be ready to articulate our value to our buyers. It's as simple as that.
You're real right. You're 100% correct. We've got Ryan Holmes in our market that pays $2,500 on a $700,000 sale. But then when the market turns around, we're heading into this is going to help balance the market because it's going to create a little bit of chaos, right? And I just think that you're right. I mean, we deal with some version of this pretty frequently, especially with builders. The builders are like I beat you, then give you roses. Then I beat you, then give you roses. I mean, that's like what they.
Well, I don't know what to say.
No, but that's what they do.
All right, I'm not touching that. Dolly's ready.
Okay, sorry about that. I had the recording thing up, and once I made that go away, then I was able to unmute. The market driven thing I think is more important for the seller side, because once they realize that if they offer a 1% commission or a 2% commission or no commission at all, then they're going to get killed. And again, it goes back to how do we talk to our sellers about being willing to offer that commission? And it's just exactly what our mom was saying. It's not just the builders, it's talking to the sellers. I've already had one seller say, hey, I saw everything in the news. I'm retired. I got time to read. I don't want to pay a buyer commission. And he was a good enough friend that I said, you're an idiot. You're not going to be able to sell your house. So let's back up and let's talk about this. And of course, he's agreed to pay a commission. The other thing that I was thinking about this morning is I loved my buyers for years and years, as John knows. He had to pull me away from buyers to make me go list houses. And there were years that I never took a buyer until they came into the office and sat down with me. And we started with a meeting with the lender. The lender would pre-qualify. I'm sitting there at the table. I had my buyer book. We went through and talked about what it was going to look like to buy a house. Those were the days you put a buyer in the car with the kicking and screaming kids that kicked the back of your seat, threw French fries all over your car and goldfish all over your car. And it was horrible, but you got to know those people while they were in your car at such a level that we don't anymore. And you built such rapport. And, as you were talking about getting to the red with people, that they would not go anywhere else. They wouldn't buy with anyone else. It was a great time. And that's what we were going to have to get back to in some form. And I know Zillow and Realtor.com, all those have changed it so drastically because people call and want to see one house. But it's all about relationship and building that relationship very rapidly. John's thing about asking questions. Don't preach. Ask the questions and get to the red very rapidly. Know who you're talking about or talking to, know what kind of disc profile they are. All of those things are going to be important. So that's all I got to say, John.
Thank you, Dolly. Joe Ward, I think that you want to weigh in, but before you do, 3 takeaways question-wise that you all should be asking, and I seldom say the word should. I usually say encourage you to ask. Number 1 is a buyer or a seller's sense of the marketplace. Number 2 is their sense about what is going on, in the market. And then, easing into a pain conversation, I call a threshold, question. Okay. So with buyers and sellers, that can change, but I'll give you a few of those. This is under the heading of number 3. With sellers, I would always bring the spouse with whom I hadn't spoken into the dialogue when I met with them. And I would say, Mary, Will shared with me, ... Would you care to weigh in on that? Know what's behind the curtain. With a buyer, same thing, right? I would say, Ken, I spoke with you on the phone, but I'd like Tammy to weigh in. You always find out what's behind the curtain with the other spouse. So ask questions about what they believe about the marketplace, what they know about what we're discussing, and bring the other person into the dialogue, because oftentimes the person who's the front person really isn't the primary decision maker. Joe, would you be good enough to weigh in?
Sure. Ahmad and Dolly and a couple of the others from North Carolina have already sort of weighed in on our buyer's agency stuff, but we've been dealing with buyer's agency forever, and our buyer's agency agreement, it's probably got more teeth in it than our listing agreement if you read it closely. It doesn't matter whether we write the offer or whatever. Dolly can write the offer. If I've got the buyer's agency agreement, guess what? Joe's getting paid versus Dolly. Not fair, but that's the way it reads. So, but we've always been able to get past that by saying, don't worry about the 2.5 or 3% or whatever the commission is. You know, it's going to be covered in MLS. So my fear, I guess, not trying to go down Luke's rabbit hole, worried about everything that's out there, but is how are we going to deal with MLS? How are we going to collaborate with, you know, all of our fellow realtors and get back to that benefit that MLS brings us? We've all had a couple of conversations with sellers, and Dolly had the same thing with a lady, you know, last week. Well, I'll read this and blah, 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 blah. And I'm going, oh my God, I put my head on her kitchen table and said, I really got to deal with this today, you know, and then just answered her question. But, you know, she agreed to pay the normal commission and this and that. But that's, I guess, my fear is how are we going to collaborate in MLS again? Are all, you know, is RE/MAX going to set a fee, and is EXP going to set a fee? You know, and then if we do that, we break all the real estate commission rules. So I'm not sure where I guess I've got a question more so than the voice of experience, John.
Well, and I think we are going to see some changes. You know, NAR has this clear cooperation policy that exists, and I think that's going to have to go away.
Yeah.
Because you're not offering it out, and you know, just like in the world of commercial real estate, you don't know whether those guys are cooperating. You don't know whether when you have to call and find out whether there's going to be any offer of compensation for something commercial. It's not just automatically assumed.
It's almost like dealing with a for sale by owner in every case, calling the FSBO and saying, hey, will you pay me if I bring you a buyer, will you pay me a commission?
I mean,
Well,
we got to deal with that. It's just a pain in the butt. I mean, you're talking about, you know, the Gulf is, you know, all over your back seat. Can you imagine having between going from house to house to house, and you're calling, hey, Joe, you gonna pay me on this house or not?
But doesn't it say we can't offer it in the MLS? It doesn't say we can't put it in showing time, correct?
No, you can't put it in showing time.
Why?
I guess we're gonna have to come up with an answer. I just don't know what the answer is.
I understand you can put it in showing time.
That's my understanding too.
We're gonna have to investigate.
I read something over the weekend that the Department of Justice is going to take issue with that, but you can put it on your website. And you can post it on anything that's not, like, the problem is that there's a link from showing time in the MLS. So anything that's linked to the MLS, you cannot state what your fee is.
Will, could you take Darla's comment there?
So Darla, I had this exact same discussion with my broker last week to see if I was legal, and he said it was.
Go above that, Will. Will, go above it. Her question. That was my response to her. It's above it.
Oh, I'm so sorry. What about a scale commission from sellers? If you get X price, I'll pay X percent, and you get less, and I will pay Y percent.
Yeah, and what I weighed in on, Will, is I really believe that our negotiating skills, which hasn't come up on this call, need to be razor sharp. Let's face it, guys, in everybody's defense, there wasn't a lot of negotiating going on in the marketplace heretofore. It was basically like, you want the house, this is what you've got to do.
Right. How many of your kids do you want to give up?
Yeah, exactly. But I believe that the response there is that I wouldn't, Ken and Darla, use that out of pocket. I really wouldn't, because at the end of the day, when you do that, you could be kind of cheating yourself out of money. Negotiate it vigorously and under the radar. I always say, if you're a great negotiator, my coach used to say this, right? He used to say this about negotiating, and he used to say this about finding pain. Now, I don't like this. I don't, but the principle is sound, and we'll just weigh in a second about negotiating skills. He used to say to me, you have to see a neon sign on the other person's forehead that says, I'm doing it to you, and you don't even know it. I would say, I like the term, you've got to do it covertly under the radar. So, Will, negotiating skills.
Well, I mean, that's such a broad.
Well, in other words, we're going to need them to negotiate commissions with buyers now, is the point, right?
I think that I'm going to do what I've been doing and just say, because I've never said I work for free. I always, because I use a representation agreement and it says what our minimum fee is, let's say 3%. Let's say it says that they agree to pay us 3% if they buy a house. And then below that, it says that they authorize us to negotiate with the seller or the listing broker to get that fee. But I always go over with them. I say most of the time, they're going to pay our fee. So the only fee you have to pay us is our little, $4.95, company fee or whatever. But then I say, if by chance it comes in lower, well, then I'll let you know before it happens. So, and they're like, well, what happens then? I say, well, then I'll just have to ask for it on the contract or get some kind of a closing cost credit to offset it. So I have those soft conversations with them at the beginning. I don't gloss over that and then talk about it at the end. I've never had a buyer say, I'm not paying you, because we talk about for sale by owners. And the importance of me calling the for sale by owner first, because if you call them first, then I'm just jumping in and the for sale by owner is going to hate me. But if I call them first, then I'm bringing them something they want. So we've been having conversations about if we find a for sale by owner, and if we go to a listing where they're not offering the fee that is enough to cover what they've agreed to pay us, I have those conversations every time for the last 30 years.
Which is kind of covertly negotiating. Well, not to take exception, but you're so good at that it's at the level of your DNA. You're unconsciously competent. And a lot of us, really have to be consciously incompetent and get those skills back. And that's the only way it's going to happen. So we have Philip, we have time for two more. Philip weighed in mass email platform. Philip, I'm not so sure what I know, what you mean by that. And Cam, you also want to weigh in on something. So Philip, let's give you the microphone, and then we'll pass it on to Cam, and then we'll wrap up our call because I know you guys are all busy. So Philip, mass email platform. Could you
Yeah, well, and I don't know necessarily I use the proper term, but I mean, we all get these annoying emails from listings, that have that we can find in MLS. Well, now that's going to be a normal thing. I think everybody's just going to put everybody on a blast when they have a new listing. Now it's an excuse now to open up that email and look at it, because probably the headline is going to be, buyer friendly, seller, property address, and then, I think that's going to be kind of a norm.
That's a great point. If we're allowed to do that, man, that's a great point, Philip. Cam, you're up to bat.
Just 30 seconds. I found really effective over the past few years. If you don't have a Zoom account, today's buyer a lot of time actually prefer to meet over Zoom. So I just highly recommend getting one, because I'll usually do the free first showing as a freebie. I don't qualify them at all. I don't care about lender, only care about motivation. And if they're willing to talk to me about setting up the Zoom, I meet with them, set up the Zoom after the fact. 99% of the time, I'm walking away with that buyer, and I could put anything in front of them and they'll sign it. So if you guys don't have Zoom accounts, I highly recommend it, because it's a lot harder to corral somebody that's a stranger to meet with you in person over a cup of coffee. And when I started doing these Zoom consults during COVID, I was closing more buyers than I was before, because before we were trying to wrangle them to meet in person. But when people have kids, most parents, like my household, I work, my wife works, it's hard to get everybody all corralled in person for an hour meeting. So if you don't have a Zoom, I highly recommend it, because I've been able to, again, meet them for free, show them the first home, and then you say, let's meet over Zoom to go over the process. I don't give them anything about process in that first meeting, just show them my value. They do the Zoom, and again, 99% of the time, I'm going to close that person and get them to sign whatever. So
by the way, Cam just texted me and said, if you don't have a Zoom account, he'll give you his username and password, and you can use his. So thank you. Yeah, so listen, I'm gonna just do a wrap and hand the microphone to Will to wrap. Guys, I've recorded.
Sorry, could I get one more thing in?
Sure.
My apologies. And John, this actually came from that Inman Zoom that you sent us, like the second day, that hour Zoom. I checked that out. And one of the technical things that was said by those three guys is that this settlement will require that buyer agents have a buyer agency agreement in place before they even show the first house. And I'm not sure if that's going to be technically a requirement with all of our MLSs or not. But I just want to point that out, that may be a technical requirement. We need to keep an eye on it. My point is, if that's the case, if that's true, I think that's going to be a huge benefit for all the buyer agents out there. Because they're going to have to say, hey, if you want to see a house, you've got to sign a buyer agency agreement with someone. It darn sure might as well be me because I'm the best in the business. So use that to your advantage if that technical rule does come to pass. Keep an eye out for that.
That's a really great point, Armand. And I just want to refer to something Will said earlier. We'll find workarounds. We always have. Those of us who have been in the business longer than dirt have always found workarounds. So listen, we're going to do a wrap now. Will, I'm going to go first for 30 seconds and then let you jump in and do a wrap. So 3 takeaways. You guys who are my coaching clients know I think in threes. By the way, I did record this. I will send out a link for everybody to download it. But the first takeaway is this: ask before you get into dialogue with buyers and sellers about fees. Ask them what their conclusions, have they heard anything, ... If you do not do that, it is a big mistake. Find out what's behind the curtain. The second thing is what I just said, which Will pointed out. Look, don't worry about this unless you're ill prepared, right? There's no reason to worry. We will work it out. A lot of agents are going to migrate out of this business, which is going to leave a bigger share of the marketplace for us. And the third thing that I think that we want to take away here is that we have to be abundantly prepared now for these dialogues with buyers. We have to treat that process with all the same due diligence that we have, all the same due diligence and reverence that we have with sellers. So let me pass it to Will. Will, take us home, baby. Passing the baton to you.
The most important thing, John already said it, and that's you need to gauge what your buyer's motivations are, not with the house, but like, where do they see you in the process before you start talking at them, right? Or do they already see the value in working with you? That's really important. Breaking down your process, do yourselves that favor. Take this breathing room to break down your process. We have to start focusing on that. Use a listing agent mindset. If you're worried about meeting with buyers, like Cam said, I've been doing Zoom buyer consultations since 2018. When I first heard of Zoom, because I go to Florida for 2 months in the winter. So I can't meet face to face. So I've been doing listing appointments and buyer consults. And I think Cam, you get what he said, the only thing he's going to have to do differently is say, by the way, there is a form you're going to have to sign, doesn't commit you to anything. It's just going to handle that one house. I think we're going to all have like single house, non-exclusive representation agreements for the first one. And then, so don't get all jumbled up about, oh my God, how am I going to, they just want to see the house, speed to lead. You don't have to worry about that right now. Follow what Cam said. Meet them at the house if that's what you do. Or if you're able to get them off the house and do a buyer consult initially, which I did for years, then do that. Just start being smart about it and get really good at presenting. And don't wait until July. Don't wait until then, like kicking it down the road. Start doing what you don't need to now. And everyone's going to be just fine.
Yeah,
that's my feeling on it.
Yeah, I agree. We'll be fine, guys. So listen, moving forward, we'll figure it out. In the meantime, just breathe. Okay. So thanks for being on the call. I'll send you all the link to the recording. And if you have any questions, call Will. I'm too busy. No, you can call me.
Yeah. Thanks everyone for taking the time to get on here with us. Hopefully you got some value out of this.